A name can be a whisper from a ghost, the only proof you were ever loved. For the first 11 years of my life, my name was the only thing I owned. It was a shield, a secret, a story I would tell myself in the dark. My birth mother gave it to me, they said, a final, desperate gift before she disappeared forever, leaving me an orphan adrift in the cold, gray sea of the foster care system. The people who were meant to save me, to give me a future and a home, decided my name was a problem, an inconvenience. They tried to sand it down, to whitewash it, to make it fit into their perfect beige world. They thought they were being funny, practical, helpful. They had no idea that in their casual cruelty, they were twisting a key that a quiet, watchful social worker was destined to find. They didn't know that my name wasn't just a collection of sounds. It was a map, a promise, and a reckoning that would shatter all of our lives. Before I continue, make sure to subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, comment below, and leave your like. Helps a lot. Every child lost in the system nurtures a private fantasy. It's the imaginary life raft you build, plank by plank, to survive the relentless, stormy waves of uncertainty. My fantasy wasn't extravagant. I didn't dream of sprawling mansions, expensive toys, or ponies in a paddock. My dream was simple, almost painfully so. It was about a dinner table. A solid wooden dinner table, with a chair that was mine, permanently. A place where I belonged so completely that no one would ever think to take it away. I craved the mundane things other kids complained about. Arguments over who finished the milk, movie nights spent tangled in blankets on a sofa, the reassuring weight of my own front door key in my pocket. After a lifetime of being a temporary guest in a revolving door of other people's houses, the word permanent was the most beautiful, magical word I had ever known. So when the news came that a couple, the Hendersons, wanted to adopt me, it felt like the sun was finally exploding through a decade of impenetrable storm clouds. I was 11, and old enough to understand the stark reality of my situation. This was it. This was my last chance. Kids my age, especially kids who looked like me, were often overlooked, deemed too old or too set in their ways. We were damaged goods. So when I walked into their house for the first time to meet Carol and David Henderson, I had my performance ready. I wore my best, most agreeable face, a carefully constructed mask of politeness and quiet compliance. I was determined to become the kind of daughter they could never, ever send back. Their house was a 2-story mirage of suburban perfection, complete with a manicured lawn and a goofy golden retriever named Gus. It looked like a page torn from a home decor magazine. A pristine universe away from the scuffed floors and antiseptic smell of the group homes that had been my entire world. Carol was an interior decorator, and their home was her showroom, a meticulously curated ocean of cream, beige, and sterile white. David was a financial advisor who carried the scent of expensive cologne and wore shirts so impeccably crisp they seemed to rustle with importance. They were flawless, almost unervingly so, like mannequins posed in a department store window display of a perfect family. In our initial meeting, they were a whirlwind of blindingly bright smiles and effusive warmth. They peppered me with questions about school, my favorite foods, my hobbies. I gave them practiced, simple, safe answers, terrified of saying the wrong thing. Then Carol leaned forward, her perfectly painted smile tightening just a fraction at the corners. "And your name, honey," she said, her voice dripping with a syrupy sweetness that didn't quite feel genuine. "It's Aaliyah, is that right?" "Aaliyah Nkosi." She pronounced each syllable with a deliberate, cautious slowness, as if she were handling a strange and possibly dangerous foreign artifact. I felt my own smile grow stiff on my face as I nodded. Yes, Aaliyah means exalted or high in Arabic. And Nkosi, my birth mother told the first foster mom, it means ruler or chief in a language from Africa. She said it was a name for kings. A tiny warm blush of pride crept up my neck. It was the one piece of my history I clung to with all my might. It made me feel like I came from somewhere, from someone important, even if I didn't know where or who. David let out a short, sharp chuckle. It wasn't overtly mean, not yet, but it was dismissive, trivializing. "Well, isn't that something?" he said, giving my hand a brief, condescending pat. "A little queen in our very own home." Carol's smile never reached her eyes. They remained cool and assessing. "It's very ethnic," she murmured, the word hanging in the air like a judgment. "We'll have to see about that." I didn't understand what she meant, not really. Or maybe I didn't want to. I was so profoundly desperate for their approval, so terrified of jeopardizing my one shot at a real life, that I chose to interpret her comment as a strange sort of admiration. I actively pushed down the cold, slithering unease in my stomach, labeling it as simple nerves. These people were my golden ticket, my only path to that permanent seat at the dinner table. I told myself a name was a small, insignificant price to pay for a lifetime of belonging. I had no idea how terribly, devastatingly wrong I was. The first few months were what the social workers called the honeymoon period, though for me, it felt more like a high-stakes audition for a role I was born to fail. They were purchasing a daughter, and I was desperately trying to become the product they wanted. I learned to swallow the bland, flavorless casseroles Carol made for dinner, forcing a smile and calling them delicious. I learned to sit in perfect silence on the sofa while David watched hours of golf on television every Sunday. I learned to fold my clothes according to Carol's exacting standards, with impossibly crisp corners and military precision. I moved through their pristine house like a phantom, trying to take up as little physical and emotional space as possible, while simultaneously trying to prove I was worthy of the space I occupied. The assault on my name began subtly, a series of tiny paper cuts you don't even notice until you're bleeding. It started with the nicknames. "Aaliyah is such a mouthful," Carol would sigh dramatically, as if the simple act of saying my two-syllable name was a monumental physical exertion. "It's so complicated. How about we just call you Leah? It's cleaner, simpler, more elegant." Leah. The name felt like a costume, something scratchy and ill-fitting. It belonged to a stranger, a whiter, more palatable version of me that they were trying to create. But I was a performer, and my future depended on this role. I just smiled my agreeable smile and nodded. "Okay." Soon after, David started his own campaign. We were at a neighborhood barbecue, surrounded by his colleagues and their families. For a fleeting, beautiful moment, I felt a wave of relief when he put his hand on my shoulder and said, "Everyone, this is our new daughter, Aaliyah." But the relief was short-lived. He winked at one of his friends, a man with a booming laugh, and added, "We call her Ally. Sounds more all-American, don't you think?" The friend clapped him heartily on the back. "Good thinking, Dave. Much easier to spell on a soccer jersey." Leah. It was a constant, insidious chipping away at the foundation of my identity, the one thing my mother had given me. They never asked. They simply decided. Each time they used one of their sanitized, revised nicknames, it was a piercing reminder that the real me, Aaliyah Nkosi, wasn't good enough. She was too much, too different, too black. She needed to be edited, revised, and made more digestible for their sterile, all-white world. I was a person of color living in a monochrome photograph, and my very name was being systematically whitewashed to match the decor. But that was only the beginning. The nicknames were the slow, steady erosion. The jokes were the landslide. It happened at the very dinner table I had spent years dreaming of. David was on a rant, complaining about a new colleague at his firm with a name he found difficult to pronounce. "Honestly, I just don't get it," he huffed, sawing aggressively at his pot roast. "Why do people saddle their kids with these complicated names? Just pick a name people can actually say." Carol shot a look directly at me, a cruel little smirk playing on her lips. "Well, we know a little something about that, don't we? What was that second name again, honey?" "Nkosi." She dragged out the syllables, twisting them into something ugly and distorted. My fork suddenly felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. "It's Nkosi," I said quietly, my voice barely a whisper. "Pronounced Nkosi." "Nkosi," David repeated, and then he laughed. It wasn't the light, dismissive laugh from our first meeting. This one was sharp and jagged, designed to wound. "Sounds like something from The Lion King." He looked at Carol for approval, who giggled into her napkin. "David, stop. You're terrible," she said, but her eyes were dancing with amusement. Hakuna Matata and Kosi. The air was sucked out of the room. My face felt like it was on fire. I stared down at my plate, the perfectly arranged food blurring into a meaningless swirl of color. They were laughing at me. My name. At the only legacy I had from a mother I couldn't even remember. Shame was a physical force, a heavy weight pressing down on my chest, making it impossible to breathe. I felt like an alien, a strange specimen pinned under their mocking gaze. I mumbled that I wasn't hungry anymore and asked to be excused. As I walked numbly up the stairs, their laughter echoed behind me, chasing me down the hall. That night, I cried into my pillow, not just because their words were a venom that stung and burned, but because my most cherished fantasy had been brutally murdered. The dinner table wasn't a safe harbor. It was their stage and I was their punchline. If you're still here with me, don't forget to subscribe, activate notifications, leave your like, and share this video with someone. This cruel theater became a regular performance. When Carol was signing me up for a summer arts program, the registrar at the community center smiled warmly as she read my form. Aaliyah Nkosi. What a beautiful, strong name. Before I could even feel the warmth of her kindness, before I could say thank you, Carol let out a brittle laugh from behind me. Oh, that's her. You know, her given name, she said, practically spitting the words out as if given name was a contagious disease. We're in the process of changing it, thank goodness. We just call her Leah. It's so much more practical. The registrar's smile vanished. She looked from Carol's smug face to my mortified one, and her eyes filled with a look of pure, unadulterated sympathy. I wished the floor would crack open and swallow me whole. They thought they were saving me from a lifetime of inconvenience, but what they were really doing was systematically erasing every trace of me. I became so conditioned to the shame that I started to dread meeting new people. I would preemptively introduce myself as Leah, just to avoid the inevitable performance from Carol and David, the forced laughs, the condescending explanations. I was actively participating in my own erasure, and that was the most profoundly shameful feeling of all. For the first year following an adoption, a social worker is required to conduct periodic check-ins. It's usually just a formality, a box to be ticked. The social worker assigned to my case was a woman named Ms. Elena Rivers. The first time she was scheduled to visit, a knot of pure terror formed in my stomach. In my world, social workers were agents of instability. They were the people who packed your life into a black trash bag and moved you to the next temporary home. Her presence in the Hendersons' house felt like a stark, glaring reminder that my position here was still conditional, that my permanent seat at the table could be snatched away at any moment. But Ms. Rivers was different from any social worker I had ever encountered. She was a black woman who carried herself with a quiet, unshakable dignity. She was calm and poised, with kind, intelligent eyes that seemed to see right through the pristine facade of the house and the brittle smiles of its owners. There was something about her serene confidence that made Carol and David visibly nervous. They fell all over themselves, offering her coffee and homemade cookies, launching into a gushing monologue about how wonderfully I was adjusting. "She's just been an absolute dream," Carol chirped, her voice an octave too high. "We call her Leah, and she's fit right in." Ms. Rivers' gaze flickered over to me, her expression unreadable. She didn't smile. "Her file says her name is Aaliyah Nkosi." David jumped in, his voice booming with false cheerfulness. Right. The formal name. We're just simplifying things, for her sake. You know how cruel kids can be about unusual names." Ms. Rivers made a small, precise note on her clipboard. She then turned her full attention to me, her voice soft but incredibly direct. "Do you prefer Leah?" The question hung in the charged air between us. Carol and David were staring at me, their smiles now fixed and strained. It was a loyalty test. Tell the truth and face their wrath later, or play my part and maintain the fragile peace. I dropped my gaze to my hands, twisting them in my lap. "It's fine," I mumbled, the lie tasting like ash in my mouth. Ms. Rivers held my gaze for a moment longer, and in that fleeting second, I swear I saw a flash of profound disappointment in her eyes. "Okay," she said, turning back to her notes. The rest of the visit was a blur of polite conversation and strained pleasantries. But something fundamental had shifted in me. Ms. Rivers saw me. It was such a small thing, but in that house of mirrors and masks, being truly seen felt monumental. Her second visit came a month later. This time she asked to speak with me alone in my room. Carol and David exchanged a nervous glance but reluctantly agreed. I could feel their presence hovering in the hallway just outside my door, listening. My room was another one of Carol's stage sets. Pastel pink walls, a frilly canopy bed, and a collection of porcelain dolls I never played with. It was a room designed for a girl who didn't exist. Ms. Rivers sat on the edge of the pristine bed, foregoing her clipboard this time. "How are you really doing, Aaliyah?" she asked, her voice gentle as she used my full real name. It sounded like a piece of beautiful music in the sterile room. I just shrugged, picking at a loose thread on the expensive duvet. "I'm okay. Your school counselor called my office," she said softly. "She's concerned. She said you seemed withdrawn, that you were having a hard time making friends." Hot tears pricked the corners of my eyes. I hadn't told a soul about the boys at school who had overheard David's Lion King joke and now chanted Hakuna Matata whenever they saw me in the hall. I hadn't told anyone that I ate my lunch in the library every day just to avoid the questions and the stares. It's hard," I whispered. "What's hard?" she pressed gently. And then the dam broke. It all came pouring out of me in a messy, desperate torrent. The nicknames, the constant jokes, the crushing shame of feeling like my own name was a dirty secret. I told her that they were planning to legally change my name to Leah Carol Henderson when the adoption was finalized. The thought of it felt like a physical blow, a final, irreversible act of erasure. Losing my name felt like losing the last surviving piece of myself. I braced myself for the usual response, for her to tell me to be grateful for my new home, to try harder to fit in. That's what everyone else always said. But Ms. Rivers just listened, her expression one of intense, unwavering focus. When I finally finished, my voice hoarse from crying, she said my name again. "Aaliyah Nkosi." Her voice was thick with an emotion I couldn't quite identify. "Your mother chose that name for a reason. It is a powerful name. It is your name. No one has the right to take that from you." She wasn't just validating my feelings. She was validating my very existence. The way she said "your mother" also felt different, more personal. Not the cold, clinical birth mother everyone else used. Just "your mother." As she was getting up to leave, she paused at my bedroom door. "I'm going to look at your original case file again," she said, her voice low and conspiratorial. "There are some things from the initial placement records I want to review. Just standard procedure." But the look in her eyes was anything but standard. It was the determined look of someone who had found a single loose thread and was prepared to pull on it, no matter what unraveled. For the first time in a very long time, I felt a flicker of something that wasn't fear or shame. Felt like hope. A week later, Ms. Rivers called and asked to meet me at a small park near my school. She said it was urgent and needed to be private. My heart hammered against my ribs as I lied to Carol, telling her I was going to a friend's house for a study group. The lie came surprisingly easily, fueled by a potent cocktail of fear and a thrilling, unfamiliar sense of defiance. I found Ms. Rivers on a bench near a quiet duck pond, a large, worn manila envelope resting on her lap. Her usual calm composure was gone, replaced by a raw, nervous energy. "Thank you for coming, Aaliyah," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I sat down, my own hands trembling. "Did you find something in my file?" She took a long, shaky breath. "I did. I found things that were deliberately hidden. Things that were never supposed to be seen by anyone ever again." She opened the clasp on the envelope and pulled out a faded photograph. It was of a young black woman, no older than 16 or 17, cradling a newborn baby. The woman's face was exquisitely beautiful but etched with a profound, heartbreaking sadness. She was looking down at the baby with a love so fierce and so total it literally took my breath away. The baby, wrapped in a hospital blanket, was me. "That's you," Ms. Rivers said softly. "And That is your mother. Tears instantly blurred my vision as I took the photograph from her. It was the first time in my life I had ever seen her face. I traced the delicate outline of her jaw, her high cheekbones, searching for my own reflection in her features. "She's beautiful," I whispered, my voice thick with unshed tears. Why did she give me away? The question that had been the central, haunting mystery of my entire existence. Ms. Rivers' own eyes were shining with tears. "She didn't want to," she said, her voice cracking with emotion. "She was just a child herself. Her family, they were not good people. She knew she couldn't protect you from them. Giving you up wasn't abandonment, Aaliyah. It was the ultimate act of protection." She paused, taking a moment to compose herself. She made one request of the agency. She asked them to give the baby's new family a letter, to be opened when you were older. A letter explaining who she was, why she had to let you go, and what your name meant. Ms. Rivers reached back into the envelope and pulled out a sealed, yellowed letter. My name, Aaliyah Nkosi, was written across the front in elegant, looping cursive. "Carol and David told the agency they never received it," Ms. Rivers continued, her voice hardening into steel. "They claimed it must have been lost in the paperwork. But when I went back through the original archived intake forms, found it. Their signatures, on a line acknowledging receipt of the letter." The world tilted and spun violently. They had it. This whole time. They had a letter from my mother, a piece of my soul, and they had buried it. They lied. The cruelty wasn't casual or thoughtless. It was calculated and deliberate. "But how did you know to look so hard?" asked, my head reeling. "What made you suspect them?" This was the final piece of the puzzle. Ms. Rivers looked away from me, out at the ducks gliding across the pond. "When you told me your name and what your mother told the first foster parent it meant, you told me a story about a name for kings, a story that only one other person in the entire world could possibly know." She turned back to me, her face a mask of love and a decade of unimaginable pain. "Because I was the one who whispered it to her," she said, her voice breaking into a sob. I just stared, my brain refusing to process the words. Didn't make any sense. How could she? And then I truly saw her. Not just Ms. Rivers, the social worker. I saw it in the gentle curve of her jaw, the same jawline from the photograph. I saw it in the shape of her eyes, the same kind, intelligent, sad eyes that stared back at me from the photograph. The same eyes I saw in the mirror every single morning. "The story I told your mother about our name," she said, her voice a choked whisper, "is the same one my grandmother told me. About our family line. That we come from leaders. From chiefs. From rulers." She took my hand, her fingers trembling violently against mine. "Aaliyah, I didn't just know your mother. I was with her when she named you." The impossible, unspoken truth hung in the air between us, shimmering and undeniable. "My name," she finally managed to say, the words torn from her soul, "is Elena Nkosi Rivers. I had to add Rivers for my social work license. But Nkosi is my family name. It's our name." The world didn't just tilt. It dissolved into nothing. The woman in the picture wasn't some long-lost sister or aunt. It was a younger version of her. The terrified, heartbroken girl who gave up her baby to save her. The woman who then clawed her way through life, who became a social worker, who navigated the labyrinthine system from the inside, who waited and watched and prayed for years until she could finally find a way to be assigned to the case of a little girl with a familiar name and a pain in her eyes that she recognized as her very own. "You." I couldn't form a sentence. My mind was a whirlwind of shock and dawning comprehension. "I never stopped watching over you," she cried, tears now streaming freely down her face. "I am so sorry. I am so sorry." She wasn't apologizing for leaving me. She was apologizing for having been forced to. And in that single shattering moment, all the anger, all the confusion, all the years of feeling abandoned that I had carried inside me just washed away. I collapsed into her arms, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't hugging a stranger or a foster parent. I was holding my mother. I was finally truly home. Walking back into the Hendersons' house was a completely surreal experience. Everything was exactly the same. The sterile beige walls, the relentlessly ticking clock on the mantelpiece, but I was a different person. The truth was my armor. I was no longer the grateful little orphan, desperate for scraps of affection. I was Aaliyah Nkosi, and I finally knew where I came from. I found Carol and David in the living room, absorbed in a television show. I walked over and switched it off. The sudden silence was heavy and deafening. David finally noticed me. "Oh, Leah, you're back. How was the study group?" I stood before them, my body trembling but my voice clear and strong. "My name is Aaliyah. Aaliyah Nkosi." Carol let out an exasperated sigh. "Honey, we've been over this. It's just easier for everyone if you had a letter," I cut her off, my voice ringing with a power I didn't know I possessed. "A letter from my mother. You signed for it, and you buried it." The color drained from both of their faces. They looked like cornered animals, caught in a lie so old they had probably convinced themselves it was the truth. I don't know what you're talking about," David stammered, his eyes darting frantically around the room, refusing to meet mine. "Stop lying," I commanded. "You stole her words from me. You tried to steal her name from me. You knew how much it meant to me, and you hid it away. Why?" It was Carol who broke. Her perfect composure shattered, and she dissolved into racking sobs. "We just wanted you to be our daughter," she cried. "We didn't want you to have attachments to your past. We thought if you didn't know about her, you would love us more. We just wanted a fresh start." It was a confession, but it wasn't an apology. It was all about their fears, their insecurities, their selfish desires. They hadn't adopted a child. They had tried to purchase a blank slate onto which they could write their own story. My past, my identity, my very name was an inconvenience to their perfect family fantasy. And in that moment, the last of my anger evaporated, replaced by a profound and hollow pity. The weeks that followed were a chaotic blur of lawyers, social services, and court hearings. Elena, my mom, had risked her entire career by revealing herself, but she didn't care. The Hendersons' deliberate deception was a clear and egregious breach of the adoption agreement. And now, at 12 years old, my voice, my choice, finally mattered in a court of law. The adoption was contested and officially dissolved. It wasn't a clean or easy process, but in the end I was free. I would not have to spend one more day in a home where my identity was treated as a problem to be solved. My relationship with the Hendersons is distant now. They send birthday and holiday cards. They are always addressed to Aaliyah. It's a small, belated acknowledgement, a gesture that means very little, but it's something. My real life began when I moved in with my mom, Elena. It wasn't an instant fairy tale. We had 11 years of lost time to navigate. She had to learn how to be a mother to a daughter who was practically a stranger, and I had to learn how to let her, to trust her love after a lifetime of instability. It was deeply strange and sometimes awkward that the woman who had been my formal social worker was now the one making me breakfast and tucking me in at night. But our new life, our new family, was built on the unshakable foundation of truth. We had our name, Kosi. It means chief or ruler. But for me it means so much more. Means survivor. Means fighter. It means a mother's love so fierce and so powerful it can bend the universe to its will and find its way back home. My story is proof that your name, your history, your truth, they matter. They are not things to be discarded or erased for someone else's comfort. They are the very core of who you are. The journey to get my name back was a journey back to myself, back to my mother, back to the truth. And it taught me that family isn't just about who raises you. It's about who sees you, truly sees you, and loves you not in spite of your history, but because of it. Thank you for listening to my story. Please subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, comment below, leave your like, and share this video with others.